Hello, I'm Waffles Are Better. This is a tutorial on how to use the execute command in Minecraft Java Edition. I know this video is a little long, so I'm putting timestamps in the description for every argument for the execute command, so you can easily navigate through this video to find what you want to know. The basic purpose of the execute command is to execute a specific command if one or more different conditions for a command are met, or with one or more different conditions. So for example, you could execute commands as different entities, or at different places, or if specific things are true or not. The format for the command is /execute, and then one or more conditions, and then run, and then the command you want to run if those conditions are met or with those conditions. You can also use the command to determine if a condition is met, so you don't actually need to put the run after it. For example, if you want to test if the current block you're standing in is air, you can either tell it to run a specific command if that's true, or you can just leave it blank. So for example, /execute if block my position is air, I could either say like run say hi, so it says hi if the block I'm standing in is air, or I can leave out the run and it'll just tell me if the test passes or fails. The reason I'm making a separate video for just one command is because I think the execute command is the most important command for Minecraft data pack creation. The first modifier for the execute command is align. What align does is it will align the position that the command is being executed at to an exact whole number coordinate. For example, if I do /tp and then my location, as you can see, I'm not standing at an exact whole number x or z location, but my y is exact because I'm standing on a full block. So if I wanted to align myself to the exact edge of the block, I could do /execute align. How about the x edge, run, TP, and my position. And as you can see now, I am exactly aligned on the x coordinate. And you can also do XYZ or XZ or any combination of axes that you want. I'm going to just move again to show you that. Oops, I'm going to move forward actually. To show you that if I do XZ, it'll still work and it'll teleport me to the exact corner of the block. Or if I want to teleport myself to the exact middle of the block, I can just do this and it'll take me to the exact middle. The next modifier for the execute command is anchored. So what anchored does is basically you have to choose whether you want the command to execute anchored to your eyes or feet, and depending on that, it will use a different location. So for example, if I wanted to execute anchored to my eyes, and then run teleport, and instead of using tildes like this, I'm going to use the carets. So it's actually going to teleport relative to where my eyes are instead of exactly where they are. And then let's just say 1 in this direction. This should teleport me towards where I'm looking, which happens to be the camera. So yeah, as you can see, I moved 1 block in this direction. If I do it again, I'll move another block in this direction. And this is just different based on wherever I'm looking. But as you can see, like, if I look up and teleport upwards, I teleport up about 2 blocks. But if I do that with anchored feet, I will teleport up around 1 block, as you can see. If you look at the y coordinates, this teleports me to 79.6 and this teleports me to 78. The next modifier for the execute command is execute as, and this is a pretty important one. I use this one a lot because it will allow you to execute a command as any entity in the world. At A would execute a command as every single player. At E would make every single player and other entity execute a command. At P executes as the nearest player, so since I'm the only player in the world, it would only execute at me. But if there were other players in the world, it would execute at the nearest player relative to where the command is executed. At R is a random player, at S is the entity that is executing the command. So like, for example, if you were already executing it as another entity, then this would just continue executing it as that entity. Or if I just ran this now, it would execute the command as me, and then you can always just choose a random player. So one of my favorite things to use this command with is to execute as like @e, and then you can say type equals like cow, and then summon a lightning bolt at that entity. But you can't do that without the next modifier, which is the @modifier. So the reason the @modifier is so important is that, for example, if I were going to try to strike all of these cows with lightning using the execute command, let's just see what would happen if I try to do that without the @modifier. So since I didn't use the @modifier, they all summoned lightning where I am instead of where they are. So if you just change that by just saying @s, then it summons lightning at all the cows instead, because that way it's actually summoning it at their position. Another important thing to note while I'm on this subject is that it's also important which order you put the modifiers. So for example, while /execute as @e type equals cow @s run summon lightning bolt would summon a lightning bolt at every cow as themselves. If I just move this modifier over to here, it still summons it on me because I put @me first before I said that it was executing as the cow. The next modifier for the execute command is facing. So basically what this can do is, similarly to anchored, it just executes a command with a specific orientation. So like, for example, if I went over here, I could either make all these cows teleport towards a specific block, or I could make them teleport towards me, which is what I'm going to do. So I'm going to do /execute as @e type equals cow @s facing entity @p, which is me, eyes, so facing my eyes, run TP, and then I'm going to use the carets again, so it's relative position instead of direct position, and then just towards me. So if I just keep doing this command, you'll see they just keep moving one step towards me. And they will keep doing that until I stop using the command. So if I just move over here, they will keep coming towards me. And it'll do the same thing, like I can also choose to type in a block. So for example, if I use this command, all these cows should walk one block towards this block right here that I've written here. And then every time I do it, they'll move one block towards the center. So another modifier that I think is pretty important and that I use a lot is the if modifier. So basically what this modifier does is you can choose from several different variables and it will execute the command if all of these are met. So for example, I can do /execute if block. This position is a diamond block. Then just how about run say hi, and I said hi because this is a diamond block, but if I destroy the block and do the command again, as you can see I only said hi once, and I did not say hi the second time I ran the command. Another interesting thing you can do with the /execute if block command is wireless redstone. So for example, if I just paste this command in here to check whether this button is powered, and then get a comparator, and a piston, and then set the command block to always active and repeat. Then if I press this button, that piston will go on because the test will pass and the command block will know that this button is pressed. So if I change the command for this to a different position for the button all the way up here that I've just placed, and then press this again, As you can see, whenever the button is pressed, that light will turn on. The next argument for /execute if is /execute if blocks, and this is pretty similar. So basically what it does is compare larger amounts of blocks. So you take two corners, so /execute if blocks, and then this corner and this corner, and then the northwest corner of a different structure that is the same size, because the game will just assume it's the same size, and then all, which will check if all of the blocks are the same. Then that says that all 12 blocks are the same, but if I take one block away, so they're not the same structure anymore, and run the same command again, the test will fail. If you say masked instead of all, though, it will ignore the air blocks in the source that it is comparing to these blocks, but it will not ignore the air blocks in the compared area. So these are the blocks that it's comparing to these blocks. It's not checking if they're exactly the same, it's checking if these ones match this. The next argument is execute if data, and what that does is it checks if the data of a specific block entity or storage has a specific tag or something. So for instance, if I do /execute if data entity waffles are better, let's see if I have no AI, then it'll say that I do not have no AI. However, if I summon a cow and give the cow no AI, and then I do /execute if data entity and then the cow's UUID no AI 1B. I forgot the B when I did it to myself, but it doesn't matter because I do have AI. Then it says it does count. Then just to clarify, if I do it again to myself, I still do not have no AI. Then I can also use this command to test the inside of a chest. So the chest is currently empty, but if I do this command to check if it has a chest in it, it'll tell me it doesn't have one. But if I put the chest in the first slot and run the command again, it'll tell me that it does in fact have a chest. And if you change it to the second slot, it'll tell me that it doesn't have a chest because I am specifically checking for the first slot of the chest. And if you're wondering how to find this data, you can just do /data get block and then the position, and it'll tell you that it has this this data right here. Another very useful argument is the execute if entity argument, which basically allows you to execute if a specific entity exists. So, for example, I could do execute if entity at e type equals cow, and that will just tell me if there are any cows around, and there are not any cows around. So if I summon a cow and then do the command again, it'll tell me that there is one cow. And let's see, if I just go down here and summon a bunch of cows and then do the command again, it tells me that there are 6 cows. Another helpful thing you can use it for is, for instance, execute if entity type equals cow and then like distance equals up to 5. That'll tell me if there are any cows within 5 blocks of me. But if I go up to this cow, it tells me, yes, there is one cow that is within 5 blocks of me when I'm near that cow and I execute the command. The next argument, execute if predicate, is to determine if you have an active predicate in the world. So for example, if I had a predicate named waffle, then it would tell me if I have an active predicate in the world, and I do not have the waffle predicate, but if I did, that would trigger that command. The final argument is execute if score, and I actually can't demonstrate this right now. I need to set up a score for it to work for me. So if I just do /scoreboard players, actually scoreboard objectives first, add waffle dummy, then that would create a new waffle objective. So if I test for execute if score waffles are better, waffle matches 1, then it fails because I don't have the waffle score. But if I do /scoreboard players add waffles are better waffle 1, then it sets my score to 1, and then it will come back positive. And this can also do if it's less than or equal to, greater, or greater than or equal to somebody else's score. But since I don't have another player here, I could also just compare it to another score that I have. So to do that, I need to make a new scoreboard objective. Let's just name it Waffle 2, and also make that a dummy. And then I can do scoreboard players set waffles are better waffle 2, let's say 3. So then I can do execute if score waffles are better waffle is less than waffles are better waffle 2. And so since my waffle 2 score was 3 and my waffle 1 score was 1, that worked because my waffle score was less than my waffle 2 score. But if I want to make it greater than, then that is not true because 1 is not greater than 3. And then if I go back and change this to 1, then I can test if they're equal, and they are equal. So let me just delete that scoreboard because I'm not going to need it again. The next modifier for the execute command is unless, and if you can see I'm going out of alphabetical order here because unless is just the exact opposite of the if command. As you can see, it has all of the same arguments as if does. Basically, it'll do the exact same thing as the if modifier, except instead of executing a command if a condition is met, it'll execute a command unless the condition is met. So execute unless block, the block under me is a diamond block. So the block below me is not a diamond block, so the command worked. But if I did the opposite, nothing happens because the block below me is not a diamond block. The next modifier for the execute command is execute in. So basically this determines which dimension you execute the command in. So for example, if I do the nether, I can do execute in the nether, run TP myself to my location except in the nether. So oh wow, okay, that's really up close. This is what it looks like in the nether at my spawn location. And I could do the same thing, except with the end. And now I'm at the end island. Another helpful modifier for the execute command is execute positioned. And basically this does exactly what you think it does. It just executes a command at a specific position. So for example, if I want a lightning bolt to summon right on top of that ice spike, I can just position a lightning bolt to summon there, and it'll just happen exactly where I tell it to. And this is another helpful way to hit all cows with lightning. For example, /execute positioned as at e type equals cow, run summon lightning bolt. It's a much quicker way. You don't have to do as at e type equals cow at s. You just have to say positioned, and it's pretty simple. The next modifier for the execute command is rotated, and this allows you to execute a command rotated in a specific orientation. And the most uses I found for this are to teleport an entity in a specific rotation. So to demonstrate this, I have typed in a command here that should make this cow face in the exact orientation as I'm facing. So I'm just going to change it to repeat and get a lever. Yep, and now as you can see, the cow looks the exact same way that I'm looking. If I look all the way up, the cow looks up. If I look around, the cow turns around. If I look back this way, the cow looks back this way. If I look down, Cow looks down. You can also put in a specific rotation for the cow to rotate to. So for example, I've made it so the cow should look straight up at the sky, but stay in its current position when I run this command. Yep, and it did. But notice that the cow did not rotate left or right when I ran the command. I can do the same thing though and change the way the cow is rotated instead of the way it's looking. So the cow is still looking straight up at the sky, but has now turned 90 degrees to the left. So the last two arguments for the execute command are run and store, and these are not modifiers, they're just what the command can do. So run just is what you put at the end of an execute command, and then the command that you want to run conditionally. So for example, execute if entity waffles are better will execute if I am here. Run to say what it will do if I'm here. Say hello, and then execute unless entity waffles are better. Run say goodbye. I am here, so it did not say goodbye. Then what execute store does is it stores the result of the execute command in either a bossbar or like an entity or block data or something based on how many results it gets. So I've set up a bossbar at the top of the screen with a maximum value of 20 to show how the execute store command works. So if I do /execute store result bossbar cows value and then run execute if entity at e type equals cow, this should check how many cows there are in the world and then return a value, and then that amount of cows will be put into the bossbar. Alright, so there are 13 cows and the bossbar has gone up to 13. So if we check the cow bossbar, we can do /bossbar get cows value, and it says there are 13 value, which means there are 13 cows. You can also use the command to set the maximum value. So if I do that, that means the cow's bossbar now has a maximum value of 13, and it also has a value of 13, which means it's completely filled up. Another way you can use the execute store command is to store some data in a player or entity's score. So for example, /execute store result score waffles are better than the waffle score that I made earlier, and then run execute if entity at e type equals cow, and then it says I have a count of 13. Now /scoreboard players get waffles are better waffle, and yep, I have a score of 13 now. So the last thing the execute store can be used for is storing results in entities or blocks or storage. So for example, if I do /data get entity, then the cow, health, then we can see that the cow has 9 health, and it's a float value because there's an F. So then if I do /execute store result entity, and then the cow's UUID, and then health, and then after this you put either byte, double, float, int, long, or short, and that is depending on what the letter is after the cow's data. And so this is an F, which means it's a float, and I believe all these other ones have letters after them that correspond to the first letter in their name except for integer. So then we want to put float, and then 1 because we want it to be on a scale of 1, and then run scoreboard players get waffles are better waffle. So this will set the cow's health to my waffle score, and I have 13 score, and then if I get the health score of the cow like I did earlier, we can see that the cow actually has health 10 because it has a maximum level of 10. But if I do scoreboard players set, waffles are better, waffle 2, and then I do the same command again, and then I get the cow's health again. Now it has 2 health. That's all for this video. If you have any questions about anything that I covered in this video, feel free to ask me those in the comments. And if you have any suggestions for stuff you want me to cover in future videos, you can tell me that in the comments as well. Thanks for watching.